She told me. You can't paint over a raw canvas. I said. You're right. So when she left to find her muse, I moved her out and gave her a permanent blank slate. I 29M should have sprinted for the hills when my girlfriend Clara 27F first unveiled her life's philosophy. We were about 3 months into our relationship and she looked at me with the kind of intense sincerity that only a self-proclaimed visionary artist can muster. We were in my condo having our first real disagreement because she'd creatively repurposed a $200 dress shirt of mine into a smock for a new painting. When I suggested that maybe just maybe my work clothes weren't part of her art supplies, she got this distant look in her eyes. Liam, you have to understand something fundamental about me, she said, her voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. My soul is a work in progress. It's pure, it's unfiltered. You can't paint over a raw canvas. I remember just staring at her trying to figure out if this was a line from a movie or if she was being serious. The mental gymnastics required to equate "I ruined your shirt" with "I'm a profound artist" deserved an Olympic gold medal. I foolishly let it slide. Okay, I said, already exhausted. Just maybe use an actual smock next time. She smiled, a serene, self-satisfied expression on her face. I'm so glad you get it. Over the next 2.5 years I learned exactly what that phrase meant. It was her get-out-of-jail-free card for literally everything. Anytime a conflict arose, no matter how small, she'd whip it out. Late on her share of the utilities. Money is a construct that stifles creativity. You can't paint over a raw canvas. Didn't want to go to my friend's wedding. The energy there will be so beige. My muse will suffocate. You can't paint over a raw canvas. It was her sacred text, her constitutional amendment protecting her from all forms of adult responsibility. Her process was always the same. First, a disagreement would occur. Second, she would accuse me of trying to censor her spirit or put her creativity in a box. Third, she would announce she needed to leave for a few days to chase an inspiration or realign her artistic chakras, which apparently could only be done at a friend's loft downtown or a trendy bar. Fourth, she'd return completely silent on the original issue, expecting me to be grateful she'd graced me with her presence again. If I tried to bring it up, she'd just sigh dramatically and say, "See, you're trying to paint over a raw canvas again." And the whole cycle would restart. It was like arguing with a chatbot that only had one incredibly annoying response. By the time she moved into my condo, which I own, I was walking on eggshells. But I loved her, or at least the version of her that existed between her artistic meltdowns. She insisted on not paying rent because, according to her, her presence and creative energy were a priceless contribution to the home's ambiance. She'd throw in $100 for groceries sometimes, but only if the planets were aligned and her tarot reader gave her the green light. I later found out she had a trust fund that could buy my entire building. The irony was so thick you could slice it with a palette knife. The beginning of the end came 6 weeks ago. I'm a financial analyst and my team was up for a major industry award. The firm was holding a black tie awards dinner. It was a huge deal for my career and Clara had known about it for 3 months. The morning of the event, as I was getting my tux pressed, she announced she wasn't going. I just can't, Liam, she said, staring intently at a blank canvas on an easel in my living room. The corporate energy, it's a creative void. I can feel it draining my aura already. I stared at her. A creative void. It's a dinner, Clara. For my job. The one that pays for this condo and all your expensive French paints. She physically recoiled. You're being so aggressive. This is exactly what I mean. You're trying to force my spirit into a spreadsheet. You can't paint over a raw canvas. And with that, she grabbed her tote bag full of sketchbooks and incense and walked out the door, presumably to find a less spreadsheet-y vibe. I stood there holding my freshly pressed tux, feeling like an idiot. I went to the dinner alone, told my boss my girlfriend had a sudden, very artistic stomach bug. Everyone nodded politely, but the pity in their eyes was palpable. When I got home that night, she was on the sofa meditating. How was the soulless corporate gathering? She asked without opening her eyes. That was it. Something inside me didn't break, it just clicked into place with terrifying clarity. Are you serious right now? I asked. She opened her eyes. Oh, you're still carrying that negative energy. I thought you'd have processed it by now. Clara, this pattern, we have to talk about it. She stood up, gathering her spiritual armor. I can't do this. You know I don't do confrontations. If you're going to attack my process, I have to leave. It was the same threat she'd used 100 times. But this time I didn't fight it. I smiled. You know what? You're right. You can't paint over a raw canvas. She looked genuinely surprised by my sudden enlightenment. Exactly. I'm so glad you're finally starting to understand. She smiled, turned, and left. And I went to my laptop and started planning her masterpiece of an exit. Update 1. For the next 2 weeks, I became the most enlightened, supportive boyfriend on the planet. I was a Zen master of enabling. Every time she did something that would normally drive me insane, I just smiled and used her own pseudo-profound nonsense against her. Left a pile of clay and turpentine-soaked rags in the kitchen. I'd just maneuver around it and say, wouldn't want to disturb the creative flow. Cancelled plans we'd had for a month. You have to follow the Muse wherever it leads. It's a sacred journey. Clara was in heaven. She told her friends I had finally shed my corporate skin and was connecting with my higher self. The cringe was astronomical. Meanwhile, I was acting like a one-man forensics unit. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of her Instagram stories where she was realigning her artistic chakras with $20 cocktails at rooftop bars while I was at home eating leftovers. I found a stray bank statement she'd left under a pile of canvases. Turns out her wealthy parents, who she claimed had disowned her for her bohemian lifestyle, were depositing $5,000 a month into a trust fund she'd never mentioned. Her struggling artist act was the greatest piece of performance art she'd ever created. I also had a quiet consultation with a lawyer. Since she wasn't on the deed, never paid rent, and had no formal lease agreement, she was legally considered a month-to-month tenant at will. To evict her formally would take 30 days' notice. Unless, of course, she voluntarily vacated the premises. Her little disappearing acts were about to become a legally binding decision. I just needed to wait for her to pull the trigger one last time. The perfect opportunity came about a week later. I asked if she could please tidy up her mountain of art supplies, which had conquered 90% of our shared living space, because my parents were planning to visit that weekend. You would have thought I'd asked her to sell her soul to a hedge fund. Tidy up. She gasped, clutching her chest as if I'd physically wounded her. This isn't clutter, Liam. This is my process. You want me to sanitize my inspiration? To put my vision in a closet? The theatrics were dialed up to 11. I just held up my hands. It was just a request. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. No, it's more than that. It's a fundamental disrespect for who I am. I can't create in this kind of restrictive, judgmental environment. You can't paint over a raw canvas. I just nodded slowly. Of course. I understand. She grabbed her pre-packed inspiration tote bag. I need to go somewhere my art can breathe. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her for extra dramatic effect. Based on her usual pattern, she'd be gone for at least 2 days. Perfect. The second that door clicked shut, Operation Fresh Start began. First, I called my building's management and got permission to change the code on my smart lock, effective immediately. Next, I called a moving company that specialized in fine art. I wasn't going to be petty. I had them professionally and carefully pack every single one of her belongings. Her half-finished canvases, her hundreds of tubes of paint, her weird driftwood sculptures, her collection of vintage smocks, even the incense burner I hated. Each box was labeled. I took photos of everything for my records. It was a masterclass in organized revenge. I rented a climate-controlled storage unit in her name. She'd conveniently left her wallet behind, as she often did. I used her card to pay for the first month. Then I sent her a single solitary text message. I hope you find a place where your art can breathe. All of your belongings, including your canvases and supplies, are safe in a climate-controlled unit at Urban Storage. 3B. The first month is paid for. The access code is 1123. I finally realized you were right all along. You can't paint over a raw canvas. And I can't live in a chaotic one. Protect your vision. Then I blocked her number on every app known to man and settled in to watch a movie in my wonderfully spacious clutter-free living room. The peace was deafening. Update 2. She came back after 2 days right on schedule. I was watching a documentary when I heard the beeping of the smart lock followed by the angry access denied tone. Then more frantic beeping. Then the knocking started soft at first, then escalating to full-on banging. Liam. The code isn't working. Open the door. I paused my show, took a deep breath and opened the door a few inches. Oh hey. How was the vision quest? Find any good muses? Her face was a kaleidoscope of confusion and fury. What's wrong with the lock? Nothing. I said calmly. I changed the code. Her jaw dropped. You what? You can't do that. I live here. I leaned against the doorframe. Do you though? You leave for days at a time whenever you feel like it. You don't pay rent. You actively complain about the restrictive energy. I just assumed you'd finally made your last great escape. The logic was flawless and it was entirely hers. This is illegal. I'm calling the cops. She shrieked. Please do. I said with a smile. I'd love for you to explain to them that you're not on the deed, don't have a lease, pay zero rent and voluntarily abandoned the property. I'm sure they'll find your case compelling. While you're at it, have them call your dad, the lawyer. You know, the one you told me you hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Say hi for me. Her face went completely white. The realization that I knew about her financial situation hit her like a ton of bricks. Checkmate. Where is my stuff? She seethed. Safe. In storage. I texted you the details. She fumbled for her phone and her eyes scanned the message. You can't just throw me out. I didn't throw you out. I corrected her gently. You left. I just made it permanent. You can't paint over a raw canvas, remember. I'm just giving you a new blank one to work with. The shift was immediate. The anger dissolved into the first stage of her manipulation playbook. Bargaining and love bombing. Baby, please. She whimpered, the tears starting to flow on command. Let's just talk about this. I know I've been difficult. I almost laughed. Talk. Now you want to talk. Clara, for 2.5 years talking has been against your religion. Sorry, but you've conditioned me too well. This is me protecting my creative energy. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know. I shrugged. Same place you always go. Kelsey's place. Or that older guy Julian's gallery loft you're always posting from on your Instagram stories. He seems to really appreciate your raw canvas. Her face went from white to transparent. She had no idea her stories were public. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in desperation. Days 1 through 4 were love bombing. Constant texts from new numbers about how I was her muse, her soulmate. Flowers and even a weird interpretive painting of my face were delivered to my office. All were returned to sender. Days 5 through 8 were pure rage. She launched a smear campaign on social media with vague posts about surviving a controlling partner who hated art and financial abuse. Her artsy friends ate it up, posting comments like "Stay strong, Queen." That lasted until I made one single public post. A calm, factual timeline of her behavior, complete with screenshots of her own texts and Instagram posts, ending with the picture of her things safely in a storage unit. The comments section went silent and a few of her friends even quietly messaged me to apologize. Days 9 through 14 were the bargaining and fallout phase. The best part came from Julian, the wealthy art patron. Apparently, when Clara showed up on his doorstep claiming her abusive ex had thrown her out, he thought his white knight moment had arrived. But Clara had only ever seen him as a source of free studio space and validation. When he tried to make a move, she recoiled, but she had nowhere else to go. Her parents told her it was time she learned to live off her trust fund like an adult. Her friends were suddenly busy. She was trapped in a minimalist loft with a man who wanted to unpack her trauma and explore her pain through collaborative sculpture. She sent me a frantic text. This is torture. Julian won't stop trying to align my chakras. Please let me come home. I replied with one sentence. Sounds like you need a new canvas. She called me 17 times that night. I didn't answer once. Final update. It's been 3 months. Life has been quiet. Peaceful. Normal. The kind of boring I've been dreaming of. Clara, from what I hear, eventually got her act together. Sort of. She used her trust fund to rent a tiny, absurdly overpriced studio apartment downtown. The freedom of a truly blank canvas apparently comes with a hefty price tag. Last I heard, she tried her routine on a new musician boyfriend. He lasted 3 weeks before he blocked her on everything after she disappeared to find a new chord progression. Some people never learn. The reaction from our mutual friends was telling. Initially, a few were swayed by her tortured artist narrative. But once the facts came out, most of them understood. Her best friend, Kelsey, actually called me to apologize. Honestly, Liam, I'm glad someone finally did it. She said. She's been pulling the "you can't cage my spirit" act since college to get out of everything. Maybe this will be the reality check she needs. Spoilers. It wasn't. She made one last-ditch effort about a month ago. She showed up at my door holding a small box of my old things, a few books, an old hoodie. A peace offering. I've been doing a lot of thinking. She began, her voice soft and rehearsed. That's great, I said, not opening the door all the way. Do it somewhere else. Liam, please. 5 minutes. This isn't you. I almost laughed. You're right, it wasn't. But I had a great teacher. You taught me that commitment is restrictive, that communication is a form of censorship, and that when things get tough, the answer is to just disappear. They were valuable lessons. That's not what I meant. She whispered, her eyes pleading. It's exactly what you meant. You just never expected me to be the one holding the paintbrush. She left the box on the doorstep and walked away. I haven't seen or heard from her since. The thing about people like Clara is they build their own cages. She preached about freedom but was a slave to her own inability to face reality. She wanted a raw canvas, a life with no accountability, no compromise, no lines. So I gave her exactly what she asked for. A completely blank one. My condo is finally just my condo. It's clean. The only art on the walls is art that I actually like. It's amazing how much easier life is when you're not navigating someone else's manufactured drama. I've started seeing someone new. She's an architect. She believes in blueprints, strong foundations, and talking about problems before they knock the whole structure down. It's refreshingly stable. Oh, and the storage unit. Clara never bothered to pick up her stuff. After the first month I paid for, the payments stopped. Everything was auctioned off last week. I got a call from the facility manager. He said some art student got a fantastic deal on a whole studio's worth of supplies. I hope they create something beautiful. Sometimes the best thing you can do for a raw canvas is to let someone else paint on it. Protect your peace, folks. But do it with communication and respect, not with a get-out-of-jail-free catchphrase.